Good afternoon. Welcome at the discussion panel. We got four speakers today from very different backgrounds. They would all like to introduce themselves. My name is Ton de Nijs. I'm a member of STIP, a political party in our municipality of the city of Delft. And we, of course, are a strong supporter of our LGBTI community in our city, and that's why we would like to support this event. But of course, the panel speakers would like to introduce themselves as well. So I would like to start with Gert Hekma.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be with the DWH. I've been here before also, so I liked also returning. I've been working at the University of Amsterdam as a professor of gay and lesbian studies and of sex and gender studies. And I've written also extensively on the topic of homosexuality in the Netherlands.
Pass on the mic. Keep it close to your mouth so everybody can hear you. Jelle Vos.
Right. I'm the former president of the LGBT Youth Association here in Delft. It's called Outside. And that's basically it.
My name is Julia van Kampen. I'm a lecturer at the Faculty of Aerospace Engineering, and I basically am in the panel to represent LGBT employees of the TU Delft.
Thank you. My name is Sidney Smeets. I'm an attorney in Amsterdam, criminal law. So I defend suspects, but I also represent victims of anti-LGBT violence. And I sometimes advise groups that are involved with LGBT rights. Or, for instance, one of the groups that I try to advise is a group that is active in trying to promote the use of PrEP, which is a medicine that can help prevent HIV infections.
Maybe leave the mic in the middle. We can leave the second mic here as well, so you can take it and pass it on. Might be a good idea. We've prepared several propositions, statements that we can discuss today. We would like to start with the discussion of diversity, because every team can benefit from diverse points of view. But when you hear the word engineer, you think most times of a white, old, boring man, straight, most of the time. And the question is, how do we increase diversity and visibility? Because you can see in this panel, you guys are also just white cisgender men.
Yes, I'm a very white, boring. Is it on? Okay.
It is on.
I'm a very white, boring, cisgendered gay person, so that's the only diverse thing about me. No, I think maybe it's true that people, when they think of engineers, think of this image, but as you who are here, I think, already know, I think that's not the whole picture. There is a wonderful group of LGBT students here in Delft who have a wonderful organization outside. They organize all sorts of events for LGBT plus community. So I think that in itself proves that it's not entirely the case. And even if it were the case, then it's, in my opinion, up to the people who are not to make themselves more visible. And that's what Coming Out Day is all about.
Jelle, would you like, or Gert, would you like to add to that?
Well, I think it's very important that engineers also enter the field of sexuality and homosexuality. And I would say, so my idea about homosexuality is it's not, I would say, an identity. It's not something you are, but it's something you become. You make yourself. So I guess homosexuality is a product of what you're, of your own life of the DWH, of what you're doing, organizing parties. You can, we were discussing at some point also before the meeting about that you can work with apps, that you can also create, I would say, more diverse apps, for example. Of course, you can also create diversity, because you have to realize, if you think about homosexuality, it's always diverse. It was different in the past, it was different in other countries. It's also different for different people. There's people who are BDSM, in the gay community. There's people who are into arts. There's people who are into, I would say, there's a lot of variation that we should also accept and also be proud of and entertain and I would say support and suggest also. And it's also the case for engineers. I guess there's a lot, for example, I've had students who worked on the topic of architecture and sexuality. How can you create a neighborhood where also is sexuality included, homosexuality, heterosexuality, all those variations?
Julian?
Well, I think the first problem we have is basically the demographic of the students we have here. If I look in my lecture room, I see a majority of white male students. So, yeah, they are diverse in their own right, but we just cannot see this diversity. I think that is also a thing that plays a role here. And even here, we as a panel, we might seem very homogeneous, but I'm pretty sure we're pretty diverse in sitting here and also in our opinions on this matter. Another thing I would like to respond to was like the proposition that homosexuality is something that you create. I disagree with that. I think the whole idea behind diversity is that we all can be who we are, that we don't need to play a role, that we just can be who we are.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that, but I sort of slightly disagree. I think in Delft we already have a lot of internationals and people who are very diverse. And I think it's mostly the previous generation that is portraying as like just a white straight male. That is our image of an engineer. And I have all the faith in the world that with the next generation we can, reshape that image, make it more diverse.
Maybe just to respond a little bit, of course it's always the previous generation's fault. I have to agree with Gert a little bit on the fact that you create your own homosexuality. There are many studies about how you become a homosexual, not so much in the sense that it's a choice to become a homosexual, but that it is something that to a certain degree you'll have to learn. If you grow up in a straight family, with straight people all around you in a straight society, you'll have to learn to some degree what it means to be LGBT and what it means to be more diverse. And I think that's part of what Gert is saying, that you do become a homosexual in a certain sense, even though, of course, you are born in the sexual preference that you have. Maybe you're born in a certain gender that differs from the one that you biologically have. And even in that case, it's not so much that you become the gender in the sense that you have to make a choice to become a gender, but it is something that you'll have to discover in some way, that something is different about you. And I think that's something that we all have in common. There is something different about everybody, but especially about the LGBT community, that is different from the general heteronormative norm.
Well, let me give also two examples. So I would say the word homosexual, it's invented for the first time in 1869. And then Kurt Benny, a man who fought against, I would say, the German criminal law that, I would say, criminalized sexual behavior between men. And then Kurt Benny invented the word homosexual, and also he and other people at that time also made a theory about homosexuality. So then for the first time they came with the theory of a homosexual identity that was inborn. That was, I would say, that's one example of how homosexuality is being made. And because we have this the coming out day today, let me give my own coming out. Well, I wouldn't say it's a coming out, but my feelings about homosexuality, they have been created, I would say, by the inspiration of Santa Claus. So at the time of Black Pete and Santa Claus, when I was a boy of 5 or 6 years of age, and my idea was about the story of Santa Claus, that it was very interesting to hang out with the bad boys. I didn't want to be a good boy. I suppose I was a good boy, but I found it interesting had to be brought to the back of, I would say, Santa Claus, and to be brought as as a, well, I would say a nasty boy, a rebel, whatever you can call it, had to Spain, where you have summer in winter time. So for all kinds of reasons, my ideas as a child about I would say the sexual situation had very much, I would say, in an SM direction and a homosexual direction. I didn't define myself as gay or as the S&M person, but I would say had this more or less the origins of my interest, and that's much more broad than I would say than simply saying I'm a homosexual. So that's also one of the reasons I don't like this so much, but also because I would say that you always have. So coming out is a sort of continuous affair. Yeah, it's not if you say to your parents, I'm now a gay person, but then you have to say I have a lover. Then you have to say I'm not into lovers, I'm into open relationships. So I would say it's a continuous struggle. And also if you meet new people, you have also to come out again.
If any of the responses from the panel raises questions with you guys in the crowd, please raise your hand. You can always ask clarifying questions. It's not a one-way discussion all the time, of course. Jelle, closing statement for this.
Yeah, so I think what Gert says is sort of a very extreme example of what Sydney said, is that everybody has something different in them, and it's our job to show that and to stand for that. And I think in that way we can diversify the image of an engineer. Even if it's just skin color, even if it's just your sexual orientation, it doesn't have to, be that you want to be brought home to the house of Santa Claus or something. No, but it's our duty to show that we're different.
But it's not extreme. So I guess I'm normal. And like you are normal, we're all normal, and everybody's extreme and normal at the same time. So I would say it's not, I would say, an opposition. I would say it's everybody is abnormal in some sense. Because
It's more of an example, you would say.
Now, it's not an example. It's, I would say, a basic idea of your homosexuality. So that you will never find someone who's exactly similar to you. It's all different people. We say we are gay, but at the same time, we are in thousand ways gay.
Thank you. I think that's a nice sentence to end this statement with. The next question would be, there's a situation that when people are at university, they come out of the closet, but you can see that once they start working, they find it harder to do that again. Why do you think that is, and what can we do to maybe improve the situation?
Well, I think that a lot of students at university first come out to their friends, like-minded friends, and maybe in a second instance to their families. So basically the problem we see here is that the students, although they might seem to be out of the closet, they're actually not really out of the closet yet. It's a gradual process, as Gert also says. It's not something that from one day to the next you're fully out. It takes time, it takes courage to do that. And the problem is that as soon as you leave university, you leave like your cocoon, your safe space. What will happen is that, well, first you need to test the water again to see, is it safe? Is it okay to be here who I want to be? I think that is what's happening. At least that is how I would look at it.
Well, I agree. I think for most people who are graduating, it's still rather difficult to find a job in general. So I can imagine that you don't want to decrease your chances by adding something that might be something that some companies or some people still are not fully okay with. So I can understand why if you've graduated and you're applying for a job, you might not, put a rainbow sticker on your application letter. On the other hand, I do think it's important to do so, not so much the sticker, but to be open about who you are. And if questions in a conversation about a job come up, to not hide it. There's no need, I think, again, to write to Philips, starting, hi, I'm Sydney, I'm gay. That's not very important for the job to make that statement. But it's also important not to hide the fact who you are. Because if you start with hiding who you are, then you're starting on basically a lie, even if it's a lie by omission.
I think it's very true that you have to try the waters before you come into a new scene, which is exactly what it is, leaving university. Well, I don't have a lot of working experience, but I know from, we gave some LGBT lessons at high schools, and I did that together with a guy who worked at a very large company. And what he said was that when he first came there, no one was out. And he thought that he worked amongst like only straight people. But there was one point where I think it was corporate, they decided that they had to have some kind of diversity day. And they were also giving stickers or stuff like that, flags to put on your table, rainbow flags. And it was then that people saw that that the others were accepting. And when that happened, like suddenly, okay, first one person came out, and the second, and suddenly like 50 people at once. I think that's a very beautiful thing. If we all just show that we at least tolerate it, that we're allies, then I think in the workplace it might become just as accepting as university is now.
Now, let me say, in the first place, I guess the shame is coming very much from the idea that gay people are always educated by straight people. We are coming from a straight culture, and we have learned by a straight culture, and the straight culture is always demeaning about homosexuals. So if you, for example, they will say about a lot of sexual pastimes you engage in, that it's infantile, it's childish, it's stupid. You can never do such a thing without, I would say, criticism. And I would say that's very much the background of the shame of gay and lesbian people. I wanted to say something else about this coming out of the closet. So I don't care whether you come out of the closet. I care very much what the DWH is doing, that you do something about your homosexuality. And you can do many, many different things about your homosexuality. I wanted to say something else. So you need, I would say, what should be. I've been teaching gay and lesbian studies at the University of Amsterdam. It should be very good. There's also a sexual topic in the University of Delft. That you can also create, perhaps not as gay and lesbian, but you can say sex and gender. That's a possibility. Well, I had something else to say, but I will.
Maybe a response from our teacher.
Well, I think that the coming out actually, indeed, as Jelle said, first of all, creates responses of your surroundings. Also, that other people suddenly say, "Hey, I'm gay too," even though you would never have expected it before. That actually happened to me. And the other thing in coming out, what I want to reply to this, it's actually the expectations that we think our surroundings have of us. And that is what people struggle with, actually. So you think that your surroundings think it's not okay for you to be who you are. And only when you discover that they actually are quite all right with you being who you are, it's okay.
Well, I would say, so there's always this idea in the Netherlands, we are a tolerant country. I would say the first thing I taught my students, forget about the Netherlands being a tolerant country. The Dutch people are not tolerant about sex. I would say they're hiding about sex. I would say they keep it, I would say very much, you have three, norms in Holland. There's a heterosexual norm, that you have been taught as gay people or so. There is a coital norm. I always suggest to women, stop allowing men to fuck you. I guess it's more interesting for women to have, I would say, clitoral stimulation. And the third, I would say, thing we have very much in Holland is the idea of the monogamous norm, as you have to be in a couple. Forget about couples. So many people are not happy in couples. You are suffering from jealousy and all those kind of issues. So I would say it should be very good for you as gay people when you think about coming out. Well, forget about coming out, forget about heterosexuality, don't care about who you are. So we are living in a free country, you have the freedom of expression, not only about speaking, but also about doing what you like. And that's the first thing you have to realize, I guess. That's
Can I ask something about that? Would you say you should also share that kind of information about yourself on the workplace?
I guess you can also show it how you behave. So we had in the past in Amsterdam Fabiola. It was a living piece of art. And so he didn't have to say I'm gay or something. He showed it. So it's not something you can show. We showed it in the past with pink triangles and this kind of stuff. Now, of course, you can. So you should discuss it. So I'm always saying to gay people, you have always a lot of discussions about gayness. So had they ask you, who is the man, who is the woman, for example, in a relationship? How is cruising? What is meeting, having a public sex, for example? So I would say answer those questions, but also ask the question also to straight people. Ask straight people, who is the male and the female in your relation? Is your husband going to prostitutes? Are you engaging in anal sex? Do you go to BDSM places? Yeah. To wasteland?
I agree. The very important thing, again, about coming out day is, of course, visibility. Visibility is crucial because if homosexuality, LGBT people, trans people, intersex people are not visible, then there's nothing to accept or to tolerate because nobody knows about it. And that's very easy for the heteronormative society because they don't have to deal with it because they don't see it. So being visible is very important, and being visible in your own way, whether that is like Fabiola by being a living piece of art when she was still alive, or he, or whether it is by wearing a lipstick, or as a man or as a woman, maybe having very short hair and being very visual in your maybe your sexual orientation. It's very important to be visible, and the visibility part is part of, in your workplace. Again, I wouldn't go so far as maybe Gert, that during lunchtime you have to discuss your BDSM fetishes, but you shouldn't be too ashamed of them either. People shouldn't be so ashamed of their sexual diversity that it's a topic that cannot be discussed at all.
I completely agree with that. The other thing I wanted to respond to was Dutch society being tolerant. It indeed is not tolerant, it's indifferent. And I think the worst part in Dutch society is actually the baby boom generation. They are the least tolerant towards the gay society. Sorry to say so.
Thank you. I can see a question in the back. Keep the box close to your body so everybody can hear you.
Yep. So I have a question, but I think you also have one. So I'm done. I also want to add something onto this part, which is we're very much focused on LGBTQ community, right? And particularly on the workplace. I actually want to shift the debate around. Like, we're very much used to look at us if you identify with LGBTQ, but you're focusing. I think it's okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Like this? Definitely.
Yeah, better.
So, okay, I'm gonna try. But I also invite for everybody to look at the rest of society, like heterosexuals labeled society. Because, so a lot of times when I speak with friends of mine that are already in workplaces, I often hear something like, you know, I have 3 gays in my floor alone. So, and I know also that there are other gays in other floors in my company. So these, and I stop to think, wow, so there's a process here that needs to be done for heterosexuals. Not so much on coming out of the closet, on expose yourself as who you are, regardless of whether it's a choice or you were born like that. But we should also think about, you know, you should allow for others to do this extra mile on accepting as well. So you did that. You came out of the closet. And you thought about this, you did this process, you had to, because it's your identity, it's who you are, right? But others didn't, or likely didn't, right?
So what would be your final question to the panel?
This is not a question. This is also something like, this is
You
a
would
statement.
like a
You need
response to your statement.
If, again, I completely agree with what he said. If it comes as a question at an interview, by all means, do come forward and say, yes, of course, I am. It's who I am. So I'm married, I'm single, or whatever. There's also a question on whether you should take a job if you have an employer asking these things. That's another point altogether. You know, if people want to be sure that if you're straight, well, you should ask your question about whether you would be comfortable in that place alone or
Okay.
not.
Thank you. Who would like to respond?
Maybe if you allow me, because I think what you're touching upon is something that was put in an article today by Linda Duits, one of Gert's former colleagues. And she wrote an article about Coming Out Day saying that coming out is something that you do for heterosexual people because it's for their benefit that they know that you are gay. I disagree with that. I disagree with her assessment of that. She's a good friend of mine, so we're not fighting about it, but I disagree because I think coming out is also important for yourself and for the gay community to be visible. But I agree, of course, heterosexuals need to work harder. If you look at our society, as you were saying, our society is indifferent, and you see that all around. For instance, people on television talking about LGBT people who are not LGBT people, but are talking about them, and LGBT people are not in that discussion, which is wrong. And the same goes for people who use the word gay as a derogative term. A lot of straight people do not find that homophobic, which I find astounding, but they will continuously tell you they're not homophobic, but still they use this word gay as a slur.
What I would say about that last statement, about it being a slur, I would definitely agree. And when I grew up, I always took it as a homophobic thing. But I think in some way, you know, I don't encourage to use gay or whatever as a swear word. But I think if people use it very often, it loses meaning. And there's also this slightly positive part to it, where so apparently they're just using it because it doesn't have like such a negative meaning to them anymore. So I guess in some ways it doesn't tell you how much tolerating a person is, but I do think many people perceive it as being something very negative.
Okay, I saw another question in the back.
Yes, I'll do my best with this thing. So my name is Marco Roosendal. I'm an assistant professor here, so I'm part of TU Delft in terms of the employees. And I think in terms of kind of gay emancipation, and then the whole diversity in that in itself, lesbian, transsexuals, I think I'm responding to the speaker there. I forgot your name, but you were quite, rioty about it, which is, it's good, and it had its time in our development that we had to be rioty, and we still need to be kind of, standing up and stuff. But because I see also a lot of young people here, I would just want to say, when you're a gay man, it's also perfectly fine to have one couple, to have a kind of a how do you call it? Just have one partner. That's fine too. So I just want to kind of, I agree, and I think also you already kind of, try to say that a little bit. It's okay to be who you are, including all your fetishes. That's fine. But I think it's also fine to just, be with one person if you feel like it, or if you're a lesbian, to have multiple partners. It's all about kind of these stereotypical things that we need to take apart. But I think we need a different tone, perhaps, at this moment. We don't maybe need this rioty. What's her name again? Fabiola with her magic. We might need a new type of way to do it, and I think it's much more about diversity in also the gay community. That we also may be in need for more diversity and opinions about that. Just wanting to kind of clarify that a little bit.
I would say so. It's very important. I gave a lecture on this issue, and I said it's interesting that we are being accepted, but it's one stage. So, for example, if you have all kinds of discussions about plural parenthood or about public sex, all those questions. But I guess it's also very interesting to now and then to provoke. I would say the straight community into, I would say, more alertness to the gay and lesbian issue. For too long, we have been taught by, I would say, heterosexual people we stay, I would say, in Holland, second-class citizens, like I would say black people. And so black people have, I would say, also have had, I would say, a kind of revolt against, I would say, the white domination of society. And I would say it should be very good also when the gays and the lesbians and maybe also the transsexuals and the intersexuals and had all those sexual perversions, that they also join, I would say, had this discussion. Of course, you don't have to join it. You can also sit at home and you sit with your lover. I'm not forcing you to do anything about it, but my idea is that it should be very helpful for the Netherlands to change to, I would say, to a more, to a more open society that we, I would say, have engaged with these issues.
Well, I fully agree with that. But coming to your point of maybe having a different discourse at the moment than that the kind of discourse that we've had in maybe the 70s and the 80s, which was much more about activism and maybe less about a dialogue. I think at the moment we are having a dialogue. If you look at the agreement that our new government presented yesterday, a lot of gay rights issues are incorporated in that agreement, and they're there because Dutch LGBT organizations talked with all the political parties during the election campaign and said, okay, these are the issues that are relevant to, well, because the LGBT community told these political parties, these are the issues that are important to our community and we need you to commit to those issues. And there was actually an agreement made by most political parties, excepting the Christian parties, that they would campaign about these issues and that they would try to include them in the eventual government agreement that they now made. And the interesting part about that is that this government has 2 Christian parties in it. And even though those parties are not very pro-LGBT, I can unfortunately reveal that to you, they did sign this agreement, which does include several steps towards further LGBT rights. The multiple parenthood issue is still something that's not directly addressed, but at least they've not blocked it. They've said we'll do more research about it. We need to find out how it will be incorporated in other laws, but at least they haven't said this is not going to happen. Gender registration, things like that are now part of the government policy, and that's I think a result of dialogue, but, and that's where I agree with Gert, that dialogue can only take place if you confront people with the fact that LGBT people are here. And sometimes you need to do that during a pride or whatever by maybe not just standing on a boat, but actually taking your pants off or doing something else.
Thank you. I saw another question in the crowd.
Yeah, so the issue of gay activism is quite interesting because I was talking to a friend the other day and I was asking, oh, what do you think of Outside, the student gay association? And she's like, oh, it's really nice, but it's not queer enough. And I was like, what do you mean not queer enough? And she was like, you know, it's very, like the people there are they look very normal. Like, you know, they wear suits and they wear t-shirts and they're not wearing like drag and they're not, you know, they don't take their pants off in the gay bar and things like that. That's something I never noticed, but in the Netherlands, like in the Netherlands, I'm not from here, but in the Netherlands I noticed that gay people they seem very normal. They're very integrated into society, and so they become, yeah, like not queer enough. And as a Dutch person, what do you think? I mean, it seems like you're not at the edge, you're not edgy anymore, you know, you're...
Well, indeed, was hard work. But no, well, what I think, sorry to interrupt you, Jelle, that because here it's so accepted, we don't need to be that extreme anymore. It's actually, if society accepts it less, you see, at least I think that's my observation, that the LGBT community actually tries to stand out more. Yeah. Here, where we sort of have achieved already many goals that in other countries are still to be achieved, we don't need to stand out that much, I guess.
Well, first of all, I would say it's almost as if we're normal. I guess we're all are normal, but there's basically 2 sides of us. Because I think, you know, all of us, we have our normal everyday life, and for us, outside has become a place where we come together, talk to other queer people, but we don't have to riot in each other's face with rainbow flags and all, because we are all accepting of each other. However, the other side of us is, for example, when you see us during the opening week or during Pride or whatnot, we're all in pink, we're all as gay as can be, and I think at that moment we still send out that signal, like that we're gay, we're here, and we can be here. So I think because there's already this very good amount of acceptance in Delft, we can just be like that amongst ourselves. But when it's necessary, we can go all out. And I hope today was an example of that.
Yeah, and I know, like, the thing is, because we're not edgy anymore. And I noticed that there's a generational difference. So the gentleman on the right, he's kind of like you're very like, political. Whereas I feel like younger gay people are not. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's because we're so accepted that we don't need to be political anymore because we're no longer like oppressed. What do you think about that?
But I would say, so you say we... Well, I would say we have this new government in Holland nowadays, so it's all about families, it's all about children. I would say if you talk about the law, it's very much about the familiar law. So I would say I'm a little bit fed up by it, by all this, I would say, normalcy and all this expectation of respectability and this kind of stuff. And for example, we are very happy we have a same-sex marriage, for example, but there's not a possibility for 3 people to marry together. You can go for a long time on all kinds of things that I would say are not good for gays but good for straights. Yeah, I would say that's a very long list of. That I would say if you think about for example, about cars, about architecture, about house building, it's all based on the idea of the family with 2 children. Why could we not change it? And so I would say you're architects and we're also having a discussion about engineering. And so there's a lot of, I would say, subjects you can engage in as engineers to make a different world. We are discussing about this queer apps, and it's so another possibility where you can start beyond, I would say, the dichotomous way Grindr is dealing with it.
But maybe to get back to your point, we are still very political. And last year, a member of Outside who was with an older guy, he was actually, people in his house, they bullied him and they straight up tried to get him out of the house. And we intervened. And I think we're still very political, but because these things happen more rarely, you might see less of it. But when it's necessary, we still go all out.
I agree with you in the sense that I think the younger generation has become a little less political. Luckily, there are young people who are still very involved with the LGBT rights community, and that's very important because complacency is our enemy. I mean, people who think there's this strange group of gay conservatives, for instance, who think that we all have to just act very normal and very heteronormative because that's the way it should be, and we shouldn't stand up for being different because if you want to be accepted, why be different? We are different. Everybody's different, but the LGBT community has certain specific issues that have to be addressed, yep, and that are not being addressed fully. We're not there yet. Not everything has been brought to the same level as heterosexual couples, yep, as Gert very rightly said. The society is still...
Yeah, we have so many questions in the crowd as well, so I would like to have the 2 questions that are here. But make them both to the panel and they can be answered in unison.
Yes, so I want to respond to your statement about that. You say, well, we're so accepting that we don't have to be as extreme or extrovert anymore. But I think I don't agree because I've been active at Outside as well. And a lot of times we had a discussion about the gay pride and if it's necessary and what young gay people think about gay pride, and a lot of young gay people, they don't want to go there. They don't think it is a good thing to stand on a boat half naked. So I think there's still a long way to go in this acceptance. And I think maybe it is accepted to be straight in a heteronormative, to be gay in a heteronormative way, but not extrovert or extreme.
Thank you. Next question, please. With the blue hair.
Well, for the sir on the right, it's sort of, you seem to be very adamant that stuff like open relationships and polyamory and stuff like that is really a gay issue, a queer issue, but I don't really know. Is it inherently queer? Because there's a lot of polyamorous people that are just straight, and I don't know.
Maybe first a response from
Okay. Yeah.
Julien, and then Sydney, and then Gert.
So, yes, I think you're right. I agree with you that we are accepted if we behave like straight people do. But the point I tried to make before was that the Dutch society in general accepts gay people in general already to some extent. So we try to stand out less. But indeed, we're not there yet. And we can definitely sometimes be more political. The only thing is, because at least I don't know how it's for you, but for me in day-to-day life, I don't notice anything about being gay. I don't notice any negative aspects of being gay. And I might be very privileged in that. And then the one or two incidents when I am encountering actually discrimination on being gay, I'm so flabbergasted I don't even know how to respond. Because for me it feels already, but maybe that's my privileged bubble, that it's already a-okay, that we're already there.
I guess it's very important to realize for you that there's always, the numbers are changing very quickly when it comes to, I would say the radical people, or for example the lesbian people. I remember when you had, I would say, surveys of lesbian women in the Netherlands, had, I would say, less than 1% was lesbian back in the 1990s or something. So very recently, and now only we come to 7 or 8% or something. And I would say when you look at, when you go further with the surveys, you see that, for example, 7 or even 10% of the Dutch population is into BDSM. And of course I engage also, I would say, the straight people into this kind of question. So I should like to see that when you have this LGBT issue, that you engage it also with the polyamorous people. So with, I would say, the homosexual rights, the homosexual movement has always been a movement for sexual rights. And so I would say also engage all those people who are into these rights. And let me say a final thing about those issues, that I would say a very important issue that's always also playing, when it's always said it's a private affair. So your sexuality doesn't matter in public because it's a private affair. You should also break this idea of privacy. And you should also make it, I would say, public. I would say our sexual orientation, as it's, I would say it's public for heterosexuals, but when it's coming to homosexuals, it's always a question, well, you make it too public, you should keep private. I remember that Rutte was on the Dutch television last year when he spoke about in Zomergasten, and then there was a question, how was your family? So he said, my family was accepting, it was not a problem, and we did not discuss it. And then the man asked, but you had a brother who was gay and who died of AIDS. Didn't you discuss it? Well, he said, no, we didn't discuss it. I would say when we have a prime minister who thinks that you can't discuss, or you should not discuss, I would say, the homosexuality and the AIDS status of your brother, I guess you're in a sick society. Yeah? I'm exaggerating maybe, but sorry.
I think we should also make a distinction there, because you were talking about acceptance. And I think what you're talking about is tolerance. I think in Dutch society we're very tolerant, and in the same way that there are many homosexuals who don't accept religions, for example, but they do tolerate religions, right? We don't act out hate crimes on religions just because we're not Christian or anything. But so the Netherlands is very tolerant, but we do not talk about some things very often. And I think what we should strive for is acceptance. But what we are, like, the essential part is tolerance. So whenever our tolerance is conflicted, we need to really stand up and go all out. and now it's just a slow battle for acceptance, I think.
Just to add one thing, yes, we are tolerated. The question is if that's enough, but we're only tolerated, and I agree with, I think you who said that, we are tolerated if we act heteronormatively. I represent several clients who've been attacked for being gay and for being obviously gay. I have friends who, for instance, wear makeup or wear slightly more extravagant clothing than I do, who daily get called names because of their, visible sexual diversity. So I think it's only a very thin surface layer that we have in Holland. Yes, we have some laws that are very neutral, gender neutral even, but the acceptance in society is not at the level that a lot of people actually think it is.
Thank you.
May I add one short thing?
Short
that
thing,
you
yeah.
also see that the people who are accepting actually are still struggling to accept it. So after this walking hand in hand action from last year, what I noticed when I walk hand in hand with my husband, which is almost always when we walk through the city, is that suddenly people are like sticking out thumbs, where before they never did that. And still they're trying to show, see me being accepting, but they don't know how to do it. So we're not there yet.
Short.
Yeah. So I would say, so I don't like toleration, I don't like acceptance, I like gay culture. And that's a very important thing. And you can also you can use in Delft once there's a new movie being made for the Homo Monument. It's called Monument of Pride. And there's a very good overview of gay Dutch history. I can very much advise it to you.
That is a nice bridge to the next statement that we're going to discuss. And that statement is the gay culture as it has developed in the last decennia good or bad for LGBT plus acceptance? And what does it mean to you? Who would like to answer first to that proposition? Jelle?
Well, so as I said just now, I think the gay culture has, in some sense, diminished in how edgy we are, how extreme we are. But I think, looking back at what I just said, it's because the Netherlands has become more tolerant. And right now, I think we achieve more by being a little bit less extravagant than going all out. But just again, when we have the opening week, when we do parades, we always go all out because we still want to be visible, and it's still very necessary. At my rowing association, when I first got there, I thought no one was gay. My boyfriend was also there, and I thought we were the only gay people in the entire association. And it was only after some people actually showed very clear signs of it that it became visible. And now I know that it's just there's just as many gay people relatively in that rowing association as in the outside world, but we really need to stay visible. So in some sense, we should maybe try to be as extravagant as we were before.
Julien?
Well, I think gay culture has slowly watered down a bit because more and more things were actually reached and accepted. People were, okay, now we can lay back. So that is something that I see. So actually that it's being tolerated more does not help the LGBT cause per se. So I think we could stand out more as a group, but having that said, we're also a very diverse group. So there's not like one LGBT culture.
Thank you. We're a bit short on time, so we're going to take one final question from the crowd, and then I'm afraid everybody has to go back to their lectures and their work.
Hello. Thank you for this wonderful panel. I think it's amazing that we have this coming out day and that there are discussions about all these topics. I'm engaged with the TU Delft Feminists, and that's a student activist group in the TU Delft. And I've learned through feminism about the connected networks of oppression and how they are used. So we're discussing about tolerance and diversity. I think it's the norm of the white heterosexual male that is oppressing us all. And if you look at coming out of the closet, like who built this closet in the first place, right? And I think if you have to accept yourself or have to ask other people to accept yourself, why you're raised to be in this position in the first place. And what I've learned is, I want to say too much.
Well,
I
maybe
think
the panel would already
yeah,
like
I think
to
it's about
respond.
solidarity. So I see a really big connection also with the climate change and the industry that is creating climate change, that is using people's struggles to gain power. You can see Donald Trump. He uses homophobic language, racist language to create a huge amount of power and destruct the world. And I see the only way to fight these systems is in solidarity with each other. So I think what's happening here is really important. But if we talk about how to become diverse, we should also look at, how can I show solidarity? And I'm really interested in, you struggle yourself. Like I'm struggling with patriarchy a lot. And I want to show my solidarity to the LGBTQ community. And I think I can use my privilege in this. And how do you look at this as an all-white cis male panel?
Yes, well, unfortunately we are all white cis males, but we are gay, so that's at least something. I agree with you. Patriarchy and heteronormativity, which is basically a result of that patriarchy, because it's also something that's very much to the benefit of the heterosexual male to be heteronormative, is something that a lot of groups, minorities, sexual minorities, gender minorities have to struggle with, and that's why it's good to be allied against that, and that's why, well, that's my personal opinion, I find groups like I mentioned before, the Gay Servitists, kind of the antithesis of what gay or LGBT rights and the LGBTQ community is about, because they're about getting back to that patriarchy and heteronormativity, which we shouldn't. So it's very important to have allies, and I think that's what we are seeing right now in the LGBTQ community, especially with transsexual and intersexual people, which have been brought to the forefront of the gay rights movement very much. Not so much because they are part of the same struggle, because their struggle is not about sexuality so much, but it's about gender. And even though it's a different issue, there are still the same people that we need to fight. And that's why I think it's a good thing that the LGBTQ community is now incorporating these trans rights movements much more.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, we're short on time. We're clearly not done talking yet. It's important to keep the discussion going, so please take the discussion back with you. I would like to thank all the panelists for their presence here today and taking part in these discussions, and the crowd as well, of course. But we only got 4 presents for our panelists, so Gert, would you like to be the first? There you go. Thank you very much. Jelle, thank you very much. Too much walking for me. Okay. Oh, went all right. Julien, thank you so much. Sydney, thanks a lot. I think it's not broken. Should be fine still. And of course, thanks for listening and taking part in the discussion, and hopefully we'll see you all next year.